Welcome to Bridging the Gap, presented by the Dialogue Studio at Greenwood. This podcast was created to open space for honest conversations between community leaders, public servants, and the people they serve. Conversations rooted in transparency, accountability, understanding, and trust. Produced through the Dialogue Studio at Greenwood and in partnership with the Greenwood Cultural Center, Bridging the Gap explores the challenges, tensions, and opportunities that exist at the intersection of public safety and community relationships.
All right, welcome in, everyone, to another episode of Bridging the Gap, Safe Tulsa Podcast. I am your host, Jonathan Townsend, and I can tell you right now, I am elated to be here. I'm really excited to be able to start with our second episode today. And today I have a wonderful guest, once again, Deputy Chief Mark Warmenhauser. How you doing this morning?
Doing great, John.
All right, awesome. Hey, great feedback and everything from our very first episode.
Good.
Everything went really well. I think it was a great opportunity to let listeners get a chance to know who we are. We did some kind of introductory things that probably aren't really necessary today, and we want to make sure that we use our time to jump straight into the issues, but everything went really well. And I also wanted to give, once again, another shout out and do a little housekeeping to the people who helped make this possible and bring us together. First and foremost, the Greenwood Cultural Center, and the people over there who have helped to organize this, and the folks at the Dialogue Studio. What a cool project that is happening over there, and we get the chance to benefit from that, but also from Birthright Legacy and Brother Marquise Dennis for having us in his studio. Hey, they said, come in, make yourself at home. We did exactly that, and here we are again, and just having a good time and getting a chance to admire the great work that they are doing to empower families and fathers specifically in our community. But again, just wanted to check in with you. A lot has even happened in the last few days since we've last seen each other. How are you doing? Just man to man, Chief, how are you doing with everything going on and kind of summer creeping up on us?
I'm doing great. Kids are out of school for the summer, and so shuffling them to all kinds of camps and everything else, and trying to make sure that their idle time stays occupied.
Indeed. Hey, they say the idle mind is the devil's workshop, so
right.
we want to limit that as much as possible. So, just with that being the case, just jumping straight into it. I've been thinking a lot about just the fact that we're here to do the work, and why are we here? Why are we here at this table right now? Why are you here? Why am I here? Why do we do the work that we do together? And the truth of the matter is, the reason that you and I are here at this table is because we have a situation in our community where there's still many black people who do not have a trust for our local police department. There's really no sweet way to put it. That's just the fact of the matter. And that's the situation that we're going to be talking about today. It's the situation people have been talking about for generations. And until this fixed, we're going to have to put in some real thought and some real passionate labor behind it. So, but that's the situation, and we want to make sure that we give it the proper attention that is necessary. We got to get to the root of it. Why do so many black people, even in 2026, I mean, we've been singing, we shall overcome for such a long time and for many years, and overcoming different institutions that have seemingly held us back, and a big part of that has been various criminal justice institutions over the years. So, what can be done to make sure that is no longer a reality? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So what I wanted to do was give you a chance, Chief, to explain to our listeners kind of your perspective on it. I don't think there is ever a perfect answer for anything, but what people really value, especially from you being here, is just your willingness to talk to us and be candid with us and be honest with us and admit what needs to be admitted and educate us and enlighten us on areas that we need to be educated and enlightened on. So, but that's our situation. That's why we're here, because we're not where we want to be just yet. But we do believe we can bridge that gap and get there. So my first question is, and I'm coming out swinging at you, right? Just like you would like it, right? So my first question is, what incidents come to mind can you think about in the last 10, maybe even 20 years in our city that have created a sense of distrust for many of the African Americans in Tulsa?
Yeah, I think that's the question that I think is on people's minds, because it isn't one thing that usually, turns people's backs and causes great rifts and canyons between us. It's over and over and over again. And what I would say is those incidents, while any one incident, and I'll name them in a second, but any one incident it is an issue, and it's especially an issue when it's the government, when it's law enforcement doing a wrong to the people they're sworn to protect, and it's a betrayal, and that's why it's so important to people, because it's so personal.
Right.
And so, the first one that comes to mind definitely is the Terence Crutcher, the death of Terence Crutcher. I think that is probably in the last 10 to 20 years the most significant event in the city of Tulsa. We saw it in the riots that occurred after the fact, the protests, and then just the continued conversation over that, and whether or not and then the verdict that came out of that. I think that continues to still be, and I actually talked with Dr. Crutcher several days ago, and how can we continue to work together towards moving us, and the death of her brother is a significant event, and we as a law enforcement agency have to acknowledge that, and also have to make sure that we're working with intentionality of moving forward from that.
Right.
But I would also say, let's go back 15, 16 years of the corruption trials and officers who were stealing money, planning drugs. We've heard stories of that in the past of the 90s, the 80s, 70s, 60s, whatever, right?
Right.
Well, that was a very real verdict and issue in 2010, 2011 from cases that people were put in prison on, and money was stolen and drugs were planted, and that again just adds to the canyon that already existed from historical wrongs that were done. And so I think it's on every police officer to recognize that. I think you're talking about also just the more we have increased social media, increased 24/7 news.
Yeah.
Now I'm not even sure that it feels like, well, I mean, with the death of George Floyd, it's now every police wrong action in the country is attributed to a local law enforcement. And so how does your local law enforcement overcome also those national events?
Right. Yeah, most definitely. And you mentioned a few things, but the Terence Crutcher situation, that definitely turned the eyes of the nation towards what we were doing here in Tulsa and your department. And it's really amazing just to see even how the years have gone by, but you're still dealing with the ramifications of that. And it's the first thing that you mentioned and came to your mind. And if somebody else was in here right now, that it would be likely the first thing that comes up to their mind too. And then a lot has come from that, and a lot of good initiatives, and I think changes have come because of the realization of what took place there, for sure. But also thank you for mentioning some of those other situations too. For those who might not be familiar with the what you just spoke about as far as the corruption goes, how wide was that? How many people were really involved in that? How wide was that corruption case? For those who might not remember.
Yeah, I want to say it was somewhere between Around 10 officers, I think, in very small units. And so they all worked very tight knit together. And that's usually how, when you see across the country, other law enforcement corruption things have happened. It's when a tight group of people are able to somehow keep it together and not let anybody else in, and then that creates as well. And talking about national things too, and I do want to give a nod because I'm remembering an article too. There was another police shooting of an African American man right around the time of Crutcher, and I want to say it was.
Is Eric Harris by any chance?
Was it out east in North Carolina?
Oh, okay.
Sorry, that's
Tulsa.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. And I will say that although Tulsa struggles constantly, police, community, our community still 100% does it better than any other community I've seen. And while protests happen, because again, that's First Amendment right, and we protect and make sure, and
right.
The very little criminal activity occurred in all of that, while other cities burned over their police wrongdoings. And so I still want to give credit to the Tulsa community that time and time again, the large portion of anyone recognizes that this is still our city, and as a collective Tulsans, and we don't want it destroyed just for the sake of movement or whatever. So I still want to give a complete and total applause to the city of Tulsa and the citizens of Tulsa for time and time again not destroying the city.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll appreciate that acknowledgement for sure. You know, one thing you said that really stuck out to me just a moment ago was, you know, how this has been a generational situation and not necessarily just one situation, although we did highlight, obviously, you know, Terence Crutcher. But at the same time, it's really been more stackable over the years. Unfortunately, it's like stacking Legos, you know, unfortunate Legos. And that's what has happened generationally speaking, and it is largely responsible for the sentiment that still exists, the way that we still feel, even in 2026, 27, 28, wherever we're going. That's got to be challenging to consider how difficult it is to undo that. Another thing you said was, you know, the fact that when someone feels betrayed, or that someone who is supposed to protect them hurts them, that just amplifies the pain and makes rebuilding trust so much more difficult. If I'm going to be abused, I don't want it to be mama or daddy that abused me.
Right.
That's going to hurt the worst. I would much rather have even a stranger or somebody or an enemy hurt me. But when I got somebody that I sincerely believe is supposed to protect me in any way, in any shape, in any form, that's when it gets really serious, and the sting is long lasting. And it's good to hear you acknowledge that, and you know, and I hope and pray that everybody who wears a badge, you know, under you understands that too, that you have to be incredibly careful with your ideas and your behaviors when you have such a responsibility and so much on the line. And I think that is how a lot of, you know, African Americans do feel. You know, growing up, you know, I was you know, told in different ways, you know, not to trust the police. You know, I listened to music that said, you know, we don't F with the police. And then I went to high school with friends who said, we don't trust the police. And then I got older, you know, voting age, for example, and, you know, tried to be a productive citizen and start watching more news and listening to, you know, local politicians. And then even from them, I would kind of hear that same message, you know, more eloquently said. But at the end of the day, it was, you know, there's, you know, all this corruption and there's many reasons to not trust police abroad or even police in our hometown. So, you know, if you think about just going through life like I did, you know, as a young man, just hearing that time and time again, even before I really had, you know, my own encounters with law enforcement, a lot had already been done. A lot of ideas had already kind of sunk into my head, and stereotypes, believe. So if that happened to me, and then it happens, I believe it happens to other people as well, and that's got to be something that is weighs on you, and understanding just how daunting of a task it is to undo some of that and to earn our trust back. Do you have any thoughts about just that and how that kind of weighs on you? Like, what do you pray about at night when it comes to all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll actually tell you a very personal story through policing that has happened. So I got on. I was 23 once I got out of the academy, and I was born and raised in Tulsa. And I still remember this. I went to a lady's house up around MLK and Apache.
Okay.
And it was just a report call. It was, this lady had been victimized, and I was in field training, 23, and I'm here to help. That's the perfect. Let me take your report. Let me figure out if I can figure this out, or if not, we can get detectives on it. And she opens the door. She's probably 80 something. And she immediately did not like me because of the uniform I wore and because of all the history associated with that. And when I was 23, I couldn't even grasp that. I was like, I was born in 82. What are we talking about? But I didn't, and I don't think as a police department we did a good enough job back then explaining to our officers, explaining to our recruits how important it is to ingratiate yourself with the community and to personalize yourself so that we can get past just the view of the uniform and everybody can see each other as who they are. And so it took me a while as I go through my career to start to understand that and work through that. And it's one of the things, so my prior assignment, I was the training director, and Chief Franklin had implemented that all new recruits for the Tulsa Police Department, when Greenwood Rising was opened in 2021, will go through Greenwood Rising to understand the race massacre and its continued impact on the city of Tulsa and the black community and the relationship with law enforcement.
Nice.
And we do that. And as a training director, I would at the beginning, the end, sometimes both, would remind the recruits, I am associated with the wrongdoings of the men and women who came before me who wear this uniform. And it is your job every day to make sure you personalize yourself with the community you serve as much as you can, and to have them see you as the person policing and protecting them and not just see the uniform. And I think it's been impactful. I think there's still work to that. We also have brought those recruits to Greenwood Cultural Center to have kind of a roundtable discussion of what did you think about that. And so I think it's just being honest and doing that hard conversation and work to enlighten people as to the relationship police have with the black community.
Yeah. Well, I can, just, man to man, I can sympathize with the way you felt as a 23-year-old cop, because it hasn't always been easy for me to understand the concept of like bearing the sins of your fathers. Mm-hmm. And that's essentially what you had to do. You're asking all of our law enforcement to do, to be aware of what happened, whether you were alive or not at the time, because the reality is you're still going to have to answer for that. And what it has proven not to be an acceptable answer, at least in the minds of many in the community, is, that wasn't me, or things are, we weren't around back then.
Right.
Because again, it's been a generational situation that had just kind of, we talked about it being stackable over the years, and now you have, grandparents or 80-year-old grandmothers, passing that fear down to to their kids, and then down it gets down to me. And I'm a person who's, I've never had a criminal history or anything, but I even just elaborated to you a moment ago about some of the messages that I got, and that instilled some fear into me at an early age. And, I would be hearing about things like, driving while black and things like that, where, you don't have to be in the act of committing a crime to still have apprehension when dealing with law enforcement. And with that came a lot of just community complaints. Mm-hmm. And we heard a lot of those too, especially in our meetings that we were having, in the last year or so with a lot of the African American community leaders that over at the Greenwood Culture Center. Just complaints from here, complaints from there, and that's why I wanted to turn my attention to and to get your opinion. You've heard a lot of complaints, I know, and what are some of the complaints from black leaders or black community members that you've heard and you thought to yourself, yeah, that's a legitimate complaint right there. That's something that I can kind of relate to, or something that I've seen that does need to be addressed, or has made you feel bad in one way or another. What's the complaint that you think has been legitimate?
There's two real approaches to this. I think one is the one that's more often than not the complaint I hear, that we could have been more patient. We could have spoken more kindly. We were too involved with just going through the motions of whatever we were doing on that call. Mm. And when you do that and don't show compassion, and I will tell you, I see compassion every single day from our officers to the community. But there are times in which, we're human and we don't always deliver the best service.
For sure. And
when I see that, anybody else would be irritated, but when it is with the black community, then it's, well, are they treating me that way because I'm black, right? And so now we've got to overcome that problem too. So it wasn't even just that we delivered poor service. Now the person we delivered poor service to also is wondering what's the motivation behind that,
right?
And so that probably is the one that is the hardest to overcome, because we're answering 250,000 calls a year. Officers are doing phenomenal work, but day after day, month after month, year after year, it's how do you keep a human's performance at such a high level? One of the things that we've done, and again, Chief Franklin did a great job, and Chief Larson's continued, that is the community engagement piece of community policing. So, sometimes I'm going to go off just a second. I'll come back to your question.
Go for it, man.
So sometimes people are like, well, community policing is playing basketball with a kid or whatever. Well, that's community engagement. It's a piece of community policing, because if that's the only community policing, well, then what's the robbery detective doing? Who's actually trying to catch the guy who's gone in and robbed stores over and over again, right? So in totality, it's community policing, but community engagement is such a crucial piece of that, because it takes you out of the day-to-day, and it takes you out of your enforcement mindset of, okay, I got to catch this person, or I got to catch this person, and it just allows you to have conversations, whether they're kids, whether they're adults, whatever it is, and it breathes new life into you. And so that's why we pay. We can't take all kinds of officers out of the field all the time, because there's still calls going, right? And so just as we will pay overtime for people to focus on speeders, well, if that's important and community engagement's important, well, then why wouldn't we pay overtime also to get officers out to different community engagement things too? Mm-hmm. And so that's what we've been doing as well for several years now too. The other one, though, that is very important is excessive force. So when I hear from the community that excessive force has happened, I take that very serious.
Right.
And so I'm glad we have body-worn cameras. I'm glad we have dash cameras. And then myself, as well as use of force experts on the department, legal, can all look at it and go, okay, did we take our case law, our policy, our training? Is this correct? And if not, we need to handle it seriously. Because other than, and I made this comment the other day, other than like going back to the corruption side of like planning drugs and putting people in prison that don't, deserve to go to prison, I don't know if there is another hot topic important to everyone in the community, but definitely the black community, is excessive force.
Yeah.
And so it has to be met with the same seriousness from a police department on that. And so, yeah, it's very serious. And I can promise you the Tulsa Police Department takes that weight of that seriousness to look at those complaints and does not brush them off.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that as well, because something that I think about, in my own time, especially the excessive force part, because I think it's important that there is a level of consistency when it comes to the way that we address that or interpret that. I guess what I'm trying to say is that what I'm trying to say is that situations, they all vary. Variables vary, and it's hard for the community and law enforcement to kind of see the situations kind of the same way. Like there's an emotional side to it, there's the analytical side to it, there's the legal side to it. A lot of different things to consider, which puts us all at different places when we see a video or when we hear a situation that is described. And then that's how you get someone saying, oh, was all that necessary?
Yep.
And then you have someone saying, yes, it was. You weren't there, or you don't know, what the proper procedures are in this situation, or did you have to hold him down this long, and that kind of thing. There's that lack of understanding, and there's that lack of consistency, and all that does is kind of muddy the situation, and that always leads to, it seems like, negative feedback or eventually outrage. But that's something that I would love to challenge even, the community to just be aware of or to be mindful of, just the fact that it's easy for us to simply trust each other more than to trust the police department or anyone who is considered an outsider. I mean, just think about it. We all know someone who's probably committed some crime or done something. We got an uncle or a cousin or somebody who's probably served some time or had a situation. And it's easy for us to say, oh, they're not a bad person, I know them. Or, if you only knew their situation, then you might be a little more merciful. But I would say it's the same way for you all, in law enforcement. You know each other. And, when an officer is probably getting some heat, you can speak to times when they show good character and things like that, and don't see them as someone who would be just out here willfully abusing the system or abusing people. But I do think it is important that there's some education that happens so that we understand, the policies and some of the procedures that you all have implemented over the years, but also vice versa, so that you all begin to understand the way the community sees things and why our experiences have led us to be quite skeptical and to feel like we have been targeted or physically abused at times too. So there's no, what they say, pill for that or anything that you can just swallow to make everybody on the same page. But that's something that I really hope that both parties begin to take really seriously and think about and to try to work together to see situations in a way that is mature and most of all fair and accurate as possible. So.
Yeah, and I kind of go back to one of the incidents, even though it wasn't TPD, it did happen in the city of Tulsa that you brought up was the killing of Eric Harris.
Yes.
Even if whoever knew the deputy that did that, even if they knew them to be a good guy, you can't come on TV and call the deputy the victim. I mean, that flies in the face of honesty with the community, right? And so it is those times where law enforcement has to, even if you know somebody, you can be concerned for that person, but we have to be honest about what happened. And same with, and you were talking about, we all have people who we know who've been arrested or have gone to prison, and that's true for law enforcement. I mean, we all. Right. I'm not talking about law enforcement officers. I'm talking about family members or friends that we all personally know. And I think being able to understand that I can be sympathetic and empathetic with the people I know and love, while not feeding into the I got railroaded. Oh, okay, did you? Because I know the people I know that have been arrested, and I love them. Yeah, but they
messed up.
They messed up.
And that's what I'm glad you brought that up, because that's what I'm saying. I've seen it, and I've been guilty of it myself. I'm thinking about a particular case where back when I was, anybody who knew me back in my early 20s, they know that I was with the NAACP, had a position there in leadership here in Oklahoma. And it was just so natural for me to, anytime I heard a complaint against the police department, if it came from a black person, it was so natural for me to just assume that the black person was done wrong in that situation. And there was a couple of situations where I had to write some letters to go towards, like court hearings and stuff on behalf of someone's character. And there was a situation where I did one for a young man. And if I'm honest, I really didn't know him very well. And that's the problem. I didn't know him and didn't get to do, a serious amount of investigation to see the legitimacy of his ask. I just was in a position and got to ask, and was just naturally, skeptical that he was probably, done wrong in this situation. So I wrote him a character reference and everything, which I hope, it probably went a long ways. Maybe it didn't go very far at all. But the fact of the matter is, I didn't really know him like that. I just assumed that, he was probably more innocent than he was being treated, and that's the level of consistency that I was saying is needed, because I didn't have it there. I was biased. I was assuming that law enforcement most likely did him wrong, just like they probably do everyone else wrong at the time too. And I think that that's a reality check that we need to have as a community too. Everybody who says they're innocent isn't, and everybody who says free the homie, free my cousin, some of them don't need to be free at the moment because of the fact that they have time that they need to serve for what they did. And that's just something that I wanted to share too, because we've all had people there, but it is important for us to be mature about the situation and to be fair about it. Whether we, it's a loved one involved or not. Just as a society, we're going to keep everybody safe and collectively whole. We have to start becoming more consistent with the way we handle these tough and sometimes emotional situations and ties.
Yeah, and that's that cuts across everyone, and that's law enforcement as well. We have to not immediately, this person, it especially is true about some stories that we hear about nationwide that we haven't seen the video yet, but we're starting to hear rumblings that something happened. I know early on it was like, no, there's no way, this is ridiculous. That's the same thing, right? That's immediately
out the gate.
That's right. I'm going to disbelieve. Mm-hmm. Well, I have been able to travel the country. I've learned about other law enforcement agencies across this country, and I don't do that anymore because I've seen people who royally screwed up. And so now it's, oh, hey, we're hearing this. I mean, the Memphis deal. I don't know if you remember the Memphis incident from 2 to 3 years ago, where a specialty unit had a guy who took off running from him. They caught him and just beat him to death. And as soon as that story was coming out, I was like, oh, this isn't going to be good. And then sure enough, the video comes out, and sure enough, it was not. And so it cuts both ways. It's yes, law enforcement asks the community to not just assume the worst every time they hear a story. Well, we have to also not assume every action that law enforcement takes, especially nationwide, is correct.
Yeah. So what perceptions from many in the black community, or some that you've heard, okay, let me ask that a little bit better. Yeah, what perceptions have you heard from the black community that have just made you feel, yeah, that's completely inaccurate?
I think,
Let me ask that question again, because I'm gonna give our editor a chance to, because I kind of want to ask it better. What perceptions from the black community have you heard over the years that made you think to yourself, now that's unfair and that's inaccurate?
I think a lot of that has to deal with the routine car stops that occur in the black community. I think that when you say, well, every time someone gets stopped, it's because of the color of their skin. Well, there's large portions of the city that people get stopped all the time, everywhere, and it has nothing to do with the color of the skin, but rather either the traffic issue that's going on or some type of violent crime that's going on. And while there has been, and again, those perceptions, right, are based off of some historical problems, right, over policing in certain areas, and just moving in all kinds of officers and stopping everything and enforcing everything and not serving with compassion. But those policing tactics are not, we have so much data now that we're driven by. Hey, these crimes are going on right here. Let's work with the community. Hey, community members, what do we think? Okay, we think it's these people. Okay, let's go stop these people from continuing this. So we're gonna make some car stops. Hey, we're getting complaints from this community center or this school in this area that there's constant speeding going down here. Okay, great. Well, let's go stop some people and write some citations and get that to kind of come back down. So much in the 21st century is driven now by data and not, and I would just ask the community to understand that is where our traffic stops come from. Is these are the crimes occurring. This is the intel we have about who's doing it. This is the traffic violations that are occurring that are endangering children in neighborhoods. These are the complaints we're getting from citizens. That's where traffic stops are coming from. I would say that's probably the biggest misconception, is that every traffic stop in a highly concentrated minority area is based off of race, and that is so far from the fact.
Yeah, I think I kind of referenced it earlier, but are you familiar with the term driving while black?
DWB.
It was one of the first, because I wasn't even driving age at the time, but one of the first terms that was shared with me from family. And essentially it was that you don't have to be committing a crime. You don't have to be necessarily speeding or could have your seatbelt on, but it is still possible, if not likely, that eyes are going to be, focused in and zeroed in on you just because of the color of your skin. And that's something that again, you get, as a young man, you get that early on, and it helps to kind of jade your perception of law enforcement, and it helps to cause for distrust to happen and eventually linger, because you're like, okay, well, I guess we're going to find out if this situation if this is real or not. And then the moment that I get stopped and I didn't do anything, that comes back to mind. So it is something that many in our community believe is a reality. A lot of us, I felt that way before, and maybe I was socialized to think that. I don't know at times, but it's definitely been a real feeling that I've had. I've had that feeling that I'm probably being looked at closer or more suspiciously because of me being not only black but a black man. I've had that feeling as well. So it's good to hear you say that, and I'm sure listeners appreciate that to an extent. But I'm also pretty sure that there's some listeners who are listening right now thinking to themselves, okay, how's he going to make good on that one, or how can TPD best prove that that's not the case? They're going to probably want to see more or hear more than we have time to give today to kind of help quelch that particular suspicion. And I'm just being honest and being real about it, just because, like I said, that's one that I can relate to, because it's been some times when I was stopped and I was just like, I didn't get a ticket or anything, but I'm like, okay, so, what's going on, or why? And I just happened to be in North Tulsa, or whatever the case might have been at the time. I'm getting off the IDL. So anything else you can kind of sprinkle on top of that, just after hearing my sentiments there?
Yeah, I think it would be, I think if I thought that was cured by just my statement here today, I would be wildly naive to think that would put that
Sure.
to bed.
Sure.
Some other things, and I heard about it from a community member. We were talking about it at Greenwood Cultural Center, and she brought up several officers showed up on one of her car stops when she had some young, I want to say black men in the car, but maybe they weren't all
I think
men. Maybe they were boys and girls both.
I know it was some females, I believe.
Okay, yeah, so. and they were in North Tulsa, and again, that perception of 3-4 officers showed up because of the fear of black people. They just felt they needed to be more on that car stop, and I told her this because I've also experienced it myself. Is sometimes there's just nothing a whole lot going on, and some officers just wanted to go see what their buddy's up to.
Oh boy.
And so it's really just like that nature of social, like, hey man, what's going on? Mm-hmm. And not realizing that, now
you just scared everybody in the car.
Yes.
Right.
And it was simply, oh man, what's happening? Haven't talked to you today, and I don't really have anything going on. What do you got going on? But that impacts the people that you police.
Yeah.
And so that's just one story, though.
Yeah, but it's an example, of, maybe your heart wasn't in the situation to bring fear, but you got to be, what they say, read the room. You got to know what's going on.
Oh yeah.
Anytime a car is stopped, that person who's being stopped for whatever reason, if they were in a good mood, they aren't anymore.
Yep.
If they were fine, now they're afraid.
Yes.
And you got to be aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
So, for sure. So, what would you say is what does accountability look like in as far as your officers go? Because that's something that we hear about a lot. We often hear people say, "Oh, who's holding the officers accountable?" Or even more specifically, here recently we've been hearing about like internal reviews and investigations, and how can we trust that they're actually being honest and fair about what we're hearing and what's being determined on the inside. We need somebody from the outside to oversee. Like, what would you have to say, as far as some of those critiques and suspicions go?
I think that there is so much effort at making sure that a police department is held accountable by the people internally. And I can promise you, at the Tulsa Police Department, looking at video, looking at the facts coming in, so again, we associate all law enforcement with all law enforcement, right? And so I've talked with friends in other agencies where so much is just quelled at a very low rank. Well, not the case at the police department. Pursuits go all the way up to deputy chief's office, and uses of force go all the way up, and complaints get reviewed all the way up to the chief's office. Like, it is not not taken serious. Because and we've had even some reviews of our practices like, oh, hey, why do you guys bring all that up to such a high level? You should be able to. Well, no, we actually think that it's important organizationally to make sure that we're putting eyes on that stuff, because the community takes it serious, and if we get it wrong, it impacts the trust that the community has with the police department. And so now the other thing, and I can't remember if we've just talked about this personally or if we talked about this last time, but we can't. Police discipline is guided by significant court cases throughout this country. And so if an officer's never done anything wrong and does something wrong, even if the community, and I'm not talking about improperly, I'm not talking about serious, egregious offenses of killing someone or something like that, or planting drugs. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about day-to-day stuff that might emotionally charge the community to go, we want that person fired. It's court cases that are going to say, no, that person's, you can't do that. You have to start with some type of
process.
Yes, the process, the discipline, then progressive discipline, training to go along with it. And so I know that's difficult to understand, but it's a part of civil service issues across this country. It's a part, honestly, with city employees as well. There's a process to go through if someone screws up, and discipline needs to happen. There are all the serious personnel orders are open records, so you can see if someone was received a suspension, demotion, or termination. Our video is open record. I know there's a backlog because there's so much occurring now, and there's actually law enforcement agencies that have cut back on body-worn camera because they just can't keep up with the funds to support it and everything else. So, and I'm not saying TPD's doing that or anything like that. It's just
right.
that there's a lot of accountability cooked into the system now that there was not that potential 20 years ago, 40 years ago.
Right.
And so if an agency is not holding people accountable, then we're lost in the desert. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. It is my job. It is the job of every officer to hold every other officer accountable for the betterment of the safety of the citizens of Tulsa.
That's good, man. Well, I think it was great that we got a chance to talk a little bit about some of the historical impacts that have things that have incredibly impacted the relations between the black community and the Tulsa Police Department. We just recently acknowledged the 1921 events, and it's been 105 years, and that's still on the tip of everybody's tongue, especially this time of the year. And all of that is necessary to be aware of as we think about ways that we want to make the coming years much better on both sides. So as we get ready for the summer, no, I'm gonna run that back because we are in summer now. Summer's here. Things are hot. And things get hot.
Already hot.
Sometimes things get hot, a little too hot, but that's what we're here for, to try to keep everybody safe and have the most joyful and safe summer possible. So let me ask a little bit about the game plan. Like, what's the game plan for the Tulsa Police Department this summer to try to keep everybody safe, and how are you executing it, and what are you hoping to see?
So a lot of it has to deal with finding out that information that puts us in places before things can kind of erupt. Mm-hmm. And so our crime analysis unit does a great job trying to intervene on those Airbnb parties, right, that a bunch of teenagers are trying to throw and guns end up at, and it goes bad. We've been able to really do a good job getting in on the front end of those. Some other ones is, never have we had such a good working relationship with the event holders and the businesses down on Greenwood. So we've had the Black Wall Street Biker Rally was awesome. Again, if nobody's been to that thing, I'm going to go ahead and tout Tulsa. That was cool. And I look forward to larger events in the years to come about that. Legacy Fest just wrapped up, and that was great. It was working with both event organizers to make sure that public safety was on the forefront of that, right? And that any law enforcement action is reserved for a must instead of just the first initial reaction. And then we got Juneteenth coming up too, and so working with that event organizer as well. And so it's really working with everyone in the community on the front end of things to make sure that's that everyone's going to be safe. But then it's also looking to other cities, Nashville, Austin, other cities that, and they don't get it right every time, but it's hey, what do you guys do that we think might work here in Tulsa? And it's borrowing from different cities that have large entertainment districts and making sure that we continue to adapt our policing to that. And it's just really making sure that we have enough officers on the street and still serving with that compassion to where enforcement action is still held in reserve.
Mm-hmm. Very cool, man. I shout out to everybody who's been doing these events and working with you on that. Everybody who helped to make the Biker Rally a success and Legacy Fest. There's a lot of hands that are involved in these projects, and too many names to mention at times. But I wanted to say, just from my heart, I appreciate everything that the community does collectively to put events like this on, and working with you all. It goes a long way. It's just keeping us safe. So shout out to everybody involved in that. And if you are in Tulsa and you have you can smell a teen takeover about to happen. I know you guys have been seeing the videos, and all over the country, people have been popping up and kind of taking over parking lots and doing a lot of vandalism and things like that. But if you're a community member and you feel like some young people or get worried that something like that might be happening, please say something and try to get in these young people's ears and let them know that there's better ways to have fun. There's safer things to do, and that nothing good can come from that. We don't want to see that in our town. We want to keep everybody safe. We want to keep everybody moving appropriately. So that's something that I think people like me and other people in the community who are around kids and teenagers especially, that's a way that we can advocate and co-labor with you guys, so it doesn't get to that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you call us because you know about it, and we're not going to show up and go, hey, Eddie told us, that's not what we're trying to do. Right. We appreciate that information, and we're also trying not to make mass arrests of a bunch of juvenile kids. Right. We just want to either prevent or disperse it before it can turn into something violent.
Right, and I laugh, but it's really not a laughing matter, because of the fact that these kids, they do need direction, and they need to get it from us before correction has to happen. And that comes from you guys ultimately, but it needs to come from us first. So there's a lot of great people in our community that I think are willing to kind of get on the front line. But now's the time before, like I said, summer gets too hot. So with that being the case, this is an awesome second episode. for us to be able to have today. I want to thank everybody again who helped put us together at this table. I want to let people know that they can find and listen to this podcast on different platforms. Amongst those are like Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music. Feel free to share, like, comment. Again, we've been getting really good feedback on the first one. Some of the comments that might have been a little bit negative weren't necessarily about this at all. It'd just be random things that people bring up. But once again, things that we want to, eventually address and try to correct. Maybe things, that happen much further away from what we're talking about. But again, thank you for everybody who's tuning in, listening to us. Feel free to share, like, comment, pass the word, become a co-laborer with us. You guys care about the community. That's why you're listening to this, and that's why we're doing this, because we want to extend that invitation to others. So, Bridging the Gap, Safe Tulsa Podcast. Once again, Deputy Chief Warmenhauser, thank you for your time.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate you. You're always in my prayers, and with the work that you do, and everybody on your squad too. So I appreciate you guys. Everybody, thank you again. We'll be back real soon with another episode of Bridging the Gap, Safe Tulsa Podcast.
Thank you for listening to Bridging the Gap, presented by the Dialogue Studio at Greenwood. Today's conversation was about more than policing. It was about trust, communication, shared responsibility, and the idea that real progress happens when people are willing to sit at the same table and engage with honesty and respect. As this series continues, we'll keep exploring the issues, concerns, and conversations shaping public safety and community relationships here in Tulsa and beyond, one dialogue at a time. You can listen to Bridging the Gap on Spotify and all major podcast platforms. To learn more about the Dialogue Studio at Greenwood, upcoming conversations, and additional community initiatives, visit thedialoguestudio.org. Until next time, thank you for listening, thank you for engaging, and thank you for being part of the dialogue.